Caroline Mary Hartley was born in Egremont, Cumberland, England in late 1850 and was the youngest daughter born to Thomas Hartley of Gilfoot and his wife Georgiana Elizabeth Rimington. At the age of 25, Caroline met a 37-year-old Scotsman named Charles Edward Leward, originally from the capital city of Edinburgh, and the two eventually got married and had two sons, Charles Elmhurst, born in 1876, and Eric Dalbiuk, born in 1878, respectively. Charles Sr. was a fisherman by trade, though he had retired with the rank of Major General from the Royal Engineers. Throughout his time in the military, he had served in Bermuda, Corfu, Gibraltar, and Natal. By the 1880s, Caroline, Charles, and their two sons were living a rather privileged life in Wimmering, Hampshire. They had a number of housing staff, including a cook, a parlour maid, and a nurse. By 1888, Charles retired and the family moved to a grand house called Ightham Knoll, near to the village of Ightham by Sevenoaks in Kent. In his retirement, Charles became heavily involved in the community, becoming a county councillor and justice of the peace, a governor and artistic inspector of Shipbourne School, and a well-respected member of the Society of Miniature Rifle Clubs. The SMRCs were created after farmers appeared to shoot better than British troops fighting in the Boer War, and Charles, along with Earl Roberts, believed that all men should have access to a club where they could learn how to shoot. Charles also spent much of his time writing to a number of establishments to help improve current architecture, such as the state of Newgate Jail's walls and building the Household Cavalry Barracks in Windsor. Major General Leward also formed the Patriotic Party in 1907, during which time his wife, Caroline, became involved in various charitable endeavours. By all accounts, 58-year-old Caroline was well liked among the community and attended several women's groups and held afternoon teas. According to one source, both Charles and Caroline were seen as pillars of late Victorian society. On the 24th of August 1908, both Charles and Caroline went for an afternoon stroll at around 2:30 p.m. with their Irish Terrier. Caroline was just wanting some fresh air, whereas Charles had intentions to stop at a nearby golf clubhouse to collect his golf clubs, as both he and Caroline were scheduled to go on holiday in the coming days. Following the walk, Caroline was expecting a visit from a local solicitor's wife, Mrs. Mary Stewart, who was going to stay for afternoon tea. The couple walked about a mile, passing St. Lawrence's Church and school before arriving at the golf club. According to witnesses, both Charles and Caroline then went their separate ways at the wicket gate at approximately 3 p.m, with Charles heading towards the golf course. Caroline entered the gate and walked along the path towards a summerhouse known as La Casa, which was actually owned by one of the Lewards' neighbours, though the Lewards regularly visited La Casa as a retreat. Just beyond the summerhouse, the path continued through a wooded area which Caroline could use to walk home in plenty time for her visit from Mrs. Stewart, but she never arrived. A number of witnesses saw Charles Leward along the links at various times between 3:20 and 3:40. Charles then conversed with the local vicar at around 4:05 p.m. The vicar was in his car driving in the opposite direction and offered to take Charles's heavy clubs back to his home. Leward accepted and the vicar took him back to Ightham Knoll, arriving at 4:25 p.m. Upon returning home, Charles found Mary Stewart waiting for Caroline, and the pair drank tea. They both found Caroline's absence very unusual. As a result, Charles immediately went out looking for Caroline in the Seal Chart woods nearby, along with Mary Stewart, and along the path Caroline would have taken home. At 5:15 p.m, Charles and Mary split up, and mere minutes later, Charles found Caroline lying face down on the veranda of the Summerhouse, almost placed in position. Initially, Charles believed that his wife may have fainted, but after discovering blood by her head, he soon realised what horrific event had occurred. Caroline had been shot in the head, though no cartridges were found at the scene, only disappearing footsteps. Her hat lay nearby, as did an umbrella she had been carrying that day. In his own words, published in an article for the New York Times, Charles recounted the moment he discovered his wife's body. "I then examined her dress and found that it was torn. Her pocket at the back of the skirt had been torn open. One of her gloves, which was lying near, was inside out, as though it had been torn off. She had both gloves on when she left me. I then looked at her hands and saw that her rings were missing. She wore all her rings on the left hand, and always wore them, except for when she washed her hands. One of the rings was over 100 years old. It was an heirloom given to her by her mother. It was of an old design of mounting." Authorities hoped the torn-off pocket from Caroline's dress would be found and help lead to her killer, but the pocket was eventually discovered in a bedsheet by a maid who had been cleaning it. The sheet had been used to transport Caroline's body back to her home following her death. Police were also hopeful that Caroline's rings or the contents of her purse would be pawned or sold so they could trace down the seller, but unfortunately these items were never recovered. Many believed the missing rings and purse were simply a ruse to throw police off the scent from the true motive of the crime. An interesting question to ask is, how did the pocket fall off Caroline's dress in the first place? There was no sign of a struggle at the scene. Some web sleuths believe that her killer may have dragged her body onto the veranda after killing her elsewhere, and in doing so pulled the stitches from the pocket. This theory is entirely possible, though no evidence found indicated where Caroline had been killed if it had been elsewhere. Following the discovery of his wife's body, Charles subsequently ran to a nearby coach house, and the proprietor contacted the police. All Charles could muster were the words, "dead, shot." Police and a physician instantly arrived on the scene to examine Caroline's body and the site itself, as did Scotland Yard detectives alongside two of their best bloodhounds, who set off along the path to track the killer's scent, but unfortunately the trail went cold after hitting the main road. The fact that a Major General's wife had been victim of homicide left Scotland Yard with no choice but to intervene in the investigation. A post-mortem was conducted, and it was believed that Caroline had been struck over the head with a blunt object before being shot and killed at blank range around 3:15 p.m, shortly after which time her husband Charles had been seen walking towards the clubhouse. There was also vomit present on the veranda, likely produced by Caroline in a state of shock following the blow to her head. One shot had been fired behind her right ear, with the other having been fired through her left cheek. It was as if her killer had turned her body over. Two witnesses came forward, claiming to have heard 3 gunshots in the area at around the time Caroline was believed to have died. One of the witnesses heard the shots near to the Summerhouse, and 2 woodcutters also heard the shots ringing through the woods, the pair also claiming to have heard a woman's screams beforehand. Fingers were pointed towards a number of people in Ightham, including the traveller community, as being the ones responsible for thieving Caroline's jewellery and killing her, but these claims were generally dismissed. Police were almost certain that Caroline knew her killer, and were sure that her murder was premeditated. A £1,000 reward was offered for anyone who came forward with information which led to the capture and conviction of Caroline's killer. As in many cases of a similar nature, suspicion fell upon Charles Luard. He admitted to authorities that he owned 3 revolvers, though he couldn't remember where he stored his ammunition. This seemed suspicious. However, after the bullets were examined by experts, they concluded that the bullets had been fired from a .320 caliber weapon, whereas all of Charles's guns were of a much smaller caliber. It is theorised that Charles may have had a 4th weapon and lied about forgetting where his ammunition was because the bullets would confirm this, but this is purely speculation. Though Charles's stroll to the golf club was near to the Summerhouse, he claimed that he never heard any gunshots, and yet several witnesses did. The timeline of events that Charles gave also seemed to be off. For him and Caroline to walk 1 mile from their home to the wicket gate where they went their separate ways took half an hour, a reasonable time. However, for Charles to walk half a mile further to the golf club, it took him 35 minutes. What took him so long to get there? So many witnesses saw Charles near the golf club. Did he make sure he was seen by numerous people in order to cover his tracks, or was this purely a coincidence? An inquest was subsequently held at the George and Dragon Inn in Ightham, where Charles Luard was once again questioned extensively by police. They wanted to know if he knew anyone who had a grudge against him or his wife, which could have led to the murder, but he couldn't think of anyone who had any reason to kill her. Whilst under the dark veil of suspicion, Charles allegedly received a staggering amount of anonymous letters accusing him of the crime, though there is no evidence these letters existed, as Charles allegedly burned them all in the fireplace. It became so bad that Charles decided to put Ightham Knoll up for sale and auction off his belongings, removing the staff and even rehoming their Irish Terrier. He felt that he had no choice but to leave the sleepy Kentish village where everybody saw him as a cold-blooded killer. Charles Jr., the couple's only surviving child, was informed of his mother's death and was due to return home from South Africa on the 18th of September, where he would dock in Southampton. Meanwhile, Charles Sr. stayed at his friend's and the local MP's home, Colonel Charles Edward Ward, during the inquest. Ward's brother, Henry, was Chief Constable of Kent, and he was also friends with Luard. Following the inquest's closure on the 17th of September 1908, Ward took 69-year-old Luard, who appeared to be in good spirits, back to his home. That morning, Luard ate breakfast, took a bath, and wrote letters to Colonel Ward, to a newspaper editor, his brother, and his son, Charles. He then left the home, hid in some bushes, and jumped in front of a passing train by the Teston crossing, the 909 from Maidstone West to Tunbridge. According to those who found his body, Luard had a note pinned to his coat which simply read, "Whoever finds me, take me to Colonel Ward." Not only had Captain Charles Luard, the younger, lost his mother and brother, Eric, who died in 1903 in South Africa after contracting a fatal fever, he had now lost his father too. Though Caroline's death was ruled as murder, Charles's death was ruled as suicide due to temporary insanity. Many believe Charles was so heartbroken by the loss of his wife that he could no longer go on without her. Others, however, see Charles's suicide as an escape from the truth, believing he killed himself due to guilt or because he had something to hide, that he couldn't face his only son who was soon to be home and lie to him. Caroline was, by all accounts, a well-liked and charitable woman who had absolutely no known enemies. Who would kill her and why? During the inquest, Charles was asked about an alleged letter that Caroline received shortly before her death from someone looking to make an appointment with her, but he claimed to know nothing about such a letter. Police believed that, no matter the circumstances, Caroline more than likely knew her killer. Perhaps she was intending on meeting someone at the Summerhouse, but who and why? It was a very secluded place, a summerhouse in the woods. A place nobody would see anything. It was a place which would also remain vacant for a time, buying the killer time to get away. Many theories have been put forward in this case, such as that either Caroline or Charles were having an affair and jealousy resulted in the murder. A random thief accidentally killed her whilst stealing Caroline's jewellery, though she was wearing gloves, and a random thief wouldn't have known she was wearing jewellery on her hands unless they knew her personally. This theory does seem unlikely, however. One of the more believed theories is that Caroline was intending on meeting someone that day at the Summerhouse, though who and why can only be left to speculation. Another theory which was put forward was that Caroline was victim to John Dickman, who was given the death penalty in 1910 after killing a man on a train in Morpeth. Sir Sidney Orme Rowan Hamilton, who wrote about Dickman's case in 1914, believed that Caroline had seen an advert that Dickman had placed in the Times asking for financial assistance. Caroline, being the charitable woman she was, sent him a cheque, though Dickman then forged this cheque by increasing the amount. When Caroline found out, she wanted to confront Dickman, however this was how she met her demise. It was likely Charles Leward knew nothing of this, if it was in any way true, but without hard evidence, it's difficult to know for sure what happened to Caroline Leward that day. It's unclear whether Dickman even knew the Lewards, and he wasn't the kind of man who would steal rings for financial gain. It's unknown if he ever even stepped foot in Ightham. His involvement in this crime is purely speculative, though something interesting to note here is that the judge who tried Dickman, the 3 appeal court judges and the Home Secretary at the time, Winston Churchill, were friends with Major General Leward. Did these men do all they could to avenge Charles and Caroline Leward? Many people were questioned by police, however nobody was ever arrested or put on trial for Caroline's murder. Her killer has never been brought to justice. Was Charles Leward guilty of killing his wife? If so, what were his motives? Why did he kill someone so popular and charitable? What secrets did Charles take with him to the grave? If Charles did not kill Caroline, who did, and why?